Nancy. Hi there. I'm Nancy from Black Sheep Knitting in Needham, Massachusetts. We are a local yarn shop and we try to have yarns for everyone. So we have yarns in the lower price range and some in the higher price range. So it's a good mix of things for everyone. I wanted to talk to you today. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is stash. So I hear a lot from customers that they have too much stash, or that what are they going to do? You know, they can't buy any more yarn. They just have too many things in their stash and it's such a burden. I'm not doing this because I recommend you come in here and buy yarn. People buy enough yarn even with a huge stash. That's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. I'm talking about, I got to thinking about this on Tuesday when it was Giving Tuesday. They called it, that was new to me. I didn't remember it, but I got to thinking, you know, let's think about in the spirit of giving, because we're in the season of giving gifts, why not give away some of your stash? Like, go through your stash and see what you're not likely to knit with. See what's been there for 5 years. If it's been there for 5 years, you might want to consider somebody else could knit with this and have a good time. Or you could consider taking that and making something for charity. And there are lots of charities around that are looking, particularly at this time of year, for scarves and hats for people. You can make things for people in shelters. There are lots of shelters around that could use items. The local churches are probably gathering things for the holidays. There's one group that I know about called One Family Knitters, and they're in Medfield at St. Edward's Church. They meet once a week. They've met for years, and they do incredible things with small amounts of yarn, big amounts of yarn, and they put them together and give them to families, or they find charities for them to give to. There are a lot, and you can do a little bit of research and see where the best place to donate is. You can also take your yarn, put it in a bag, and go to Savers. They'll resell it to people at a very low cost for those people who want to knit. I have a friend who goes to Savers all the time and buys these gorgeous sweaters. Often you can find beautiful wool Fair Isle sweaters, because I'm always saying to her, where'd you get that sweater? And she said, oh, it's Savers. So people shop there, and that's a good place to give your yarn away, and then they'll sell it at a very low price for someone. So think about that. The One Family Knitters, we used to just drop it off at the church, but they're having a storage issue. So, and I spoke to one of the women who knits there and asked her what they needed, and she said they especially need worsted weight yarn. So what I'm going to offer to do is to be the drop-off location, and the church is right down the street from my house, and I can drop it off to them, or I can connect with a woman named Mary Kelly who represents them. What I would recommend is that it comes from a smoke-free environment, that it's clean, and that you put it in some kind of Ziploc bags so that it's closed up. And you can drop it off here, and I'll make sure that it gets distributed. The other thing that I would recommend that you do, and you can do this for something for yourself or something to give away. I took 3 yarns out of my stash. They were, I believe, a lightweight worsted yarn, and I held them together. First I tried a size 17 needle. That was a little bit big. So I got a 15 needle. I cast on 19 stitches for no particular reason. You could do it smaller. And I think what I'm going to do with this is, depending on how big it gets, I might make it into a cowl. I just held the 3 yarns together, and I'm just knitting. So it's very easy to do, to put the 3 yarns together. And you can do this with as many yarns as you want. It eats up stash, and it makes a nice, quick project that you could give away or keep for yourself. You could do a little gauge with these 3 yarns held together. see what your gauge is, and then you could find a simple hat pattern, something that you could give away or keep for yourself. But it's a great way to use stash. Someone I know used to put together, I think she put together maybe 5 skeins of yarn, and all different kinds of yarn, and then crocheted blanket, just a single crochet, made a blanket. They're wonderfully warm, and they use up, it's very satisfying to do because it knits up so quickly that you can have something, I did this in like 5 minutes in my class or 10 minutes in my class this morning. So, and it gives you a really fun effect putting 3 yarns together. You can do it with 2, you can add a mow if you've got some leftover mohair. You can also do stripes. If you've got a lot of leftover yarns and little bits of it, if they're worsted DK, that in that range, or even a sport weight, you can go on say pick a size 8 needle, and you could do stripes with each of the yarns, and it doesn't matter the gauge, because the ones that are in a smaller gauge, like a fingering yarn, they'll just be a little looser, and you could make a scarf or a shawl or whatever. So that's one thing you can do with your stash. Another thing that I have here is we were talking about quick projects for the holidays, and this is another thing you can do with your stash. This is called Briar. We may have shown this before, and this is in the Rowan Brushed Fleece, but this is a very quick project, and it's got this little decorative slipped stitch here, or maybe it's a purl stitch on the, no, it's slipped. So nice striping. You can fool around with the stripes, but you can take any yarn and do something like this, make it into a cowl, and do a bunch of stripes with a lot of yarns. It's fun to do. It's fun to sort of root through your stash and think of what could I do. Another one, and this is a yarn we have in the shop, it's called Rasta, and this is just a simple seed stitch, and it's a shop pattern, it's called Cowl with No Twist, and that you can make in 2 nights. Very easy to do. You can do it in the round, or you could do it straight and then just sew a seam. It doesn't matter if you have a seam on it. So very quick. And again, you could take your 3 yarns that you've held together and do the same thing. So that would be a fun thing to do if you haven't got any Rasta hanging around. Another thing I wanted to mention, we have these books back in stock. The Skill Set Beginning Knitting book from MDK Knitting, Modern Daily Knitting. It's a great little book. So we were out of stock, they're back in stock, and you can order them online or come in the shop. It's a great gift for somebody who's just beginning to knit. We also got in the shop the Modern Daily Knitting Field Guide number 16, which is called Painterly, and it has wonderful patterns from, I think they're mostly from Kay Fawcett. And oh, by the way, there's some beautiful, a lot of stuff in felted tweed. Those of you who follow Fruity Knitting, their latest episode is an interview with Kay Fawcett. And if you want to be inspired and just see a guy who's lived a wonderful life in textile design, and he was a painter and then discovered textiles and was gung-ho. So he does amazing quilts and needlepoint and of course knitting, and he's designed for Rowan, he designs for he's doing things for MDK, and there are others around, but if you want to be entertained, it's a good podcast. And the third one we have still in stock is called Marls. This is Field Guide number 19, and these are designs by Cecilia Campicharo, who has written 2 books. She's written a book called Marls, and then she designed, let's see if I can find another one. This one, there's one that was my favorite that I really liked. You can see, well, you can kind of see it. She's calling it a swarf. but it's more like the modern dickie that people are making with a turtleneck and then a big front and a small back. But to wear, you can see how she wears it with the coat. Then lastly, I wanted to talk about knitting processes. And, you know, somebody mentioned to me, one of my teachers mentioned to me that, oh, my students just want to knit. Well, I was thinking of an analogy to that, and as many of you know, I love to ride horses. And so I'd love to just get on and ride. Unfortunately, you can't just do that. You got to pick the manure out of the horse's hooves. You got to brush the horse. You got to put, on my horse, I put on wraps that go on his legs to protect his tendons. I have to put on his saddle, tighten the saddle, put on his bridle, which in some horses can be a bit of an argument. I have to clean up his tail. And all that takes me, and by the time I get him from the paddock and bring him in the barn and get him ready, it takes me half an hour. Well, I was thinking, and I don't love doing those chores, and when I finish riding, I have to clean him up again, pick his feet again, take everything away. I have to clean his bridle, maybe clean his girth. In any case, it's work I don't really enjoy doing, but I have to do it if I want to have the pleasure of riding the horse. Well, if you want to have the pleasure of knitting, there are certain things that you have to learn to do. One of them, the first thing you have to learn to do is to wind the yarn. Now, we wind yarn in the shop, though lately we've been awfully busy and I'm stretched kind of thin with staffing. So we offer to show you how to wind yarn on our machine. I also have a video, one of my podcasts, YouTube videos, shows you how to wind yarn around a chair, and you can do it around a chair, you can do it around your legs. You can have your husband, the old-fashioned way, have your husband hold it, which, that's fine. I think a chair works just as well. But you have to learn to do that, and that's part of the process. You've got to learn to cast on. Not a lot of people like to do that. You have to learn to do a gauge. And I know, I would say 50% of my customers say they hate doing gauge. Well, you're knitting a little sample. It takes you 20 minutes. So that's part of the process to get ready to knit your yarn. Then you have to learn to fix your mistakes. That's another process. You have to learn to cast off, and you have to learn to block and sew seams. Now, some people are just dead set against sewing a seam. But if you think about the time that it would take you to drive, suppose you live in Norfolk or Framingham. That's a 20-minute ride in and out of here. That's 40 minutes out of your day to get something to pay someone to do your seams. Now, if you learn to do them, you could sit there and do them in that 40 minutes without leaving your house, without spending any money, and you can save that money to buy more yarn. Blocking, the same thing. I've done a video on blocking. There are also many YouTube videos on how to block. Now, granted, if you've got a big, huge blanket and no space, maybe you can't do it. But you can certainly block scarves and shawls and things at home. And you can save yourself time and money by learning to do it on your own. And some people will hate me for saying this, but my motto is put on your big girl pants and learn to do some of these things. And I hate to tell you, we have many men knitters. Not a one has ever come in to have seams sewn or to have something blocked or to have ends woven in. It's not a big deal. And, I've always compared myself to, things that men can do that I can't do. Well, I feel like I can pretty much do anything that men can do, apart from the obvious things. But, sorry, Robin's laughing. I didn't mean it that way, Robin. But I learned to lift a 100-pound bag of clay. I learned to weld. I learned to put up sheetrock. So you can learn to do stuff, and you will feel such a great sense of accomplishment if you learn to do these things. And you're not too old. Now, mind you, if you're 97, I wouldn't recommend that you have to block things. We'll happily block them for you. But you can weave in ends. You can do all those simple things that I talked about. So that's my little bit of advice today. I hope I didn't offend anybody. But I do want people to become more independent. I want you to have skills. I want you to have skills that make you successful and make you a good, confident knitter. And of course, I don't want you to spend money you don't have to spend. The people that we have here that do are, putting things together and blocking stuff, they're so busy. They don't really have time to take on extra projects. And they, of course, would rather be knitting themselves. So think about that. We're happy to help you. Please, if you need yarn wound, come in, or when you buy it, mention it to us that you don't know how to do it. We will happily show you we have a wonderful winder here. Very easy to use. We can set you up on that, and we're happy to do that for you. So have a great week. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. Thanksgiving is a joyous time, and I hope people were able to get together and be with family and, of course, eat turkey. So take care and see you next time.